Calaroga Shark Media.
Hello, I'm Johnny Macc with your daily comedy news. Normally I record the entire weekend in one shot. I've been down here in the studio. I recorded my guest appearance on the Letterman podcast. If you haven't heard that yet, that came out yesterday, the Letterman podcast, special guest Johnny Macc. Then I did Friday's episode. Now I'm doing Saturday. But this room, it's kind of small, and I feel like I'm running out of oxygen. So I'm going to wait a day and record Sunday. I need to breathe. On the interview on the Letterman podcast, I mentioned how I put the show together, and I'll put a shiny name in the title and move that to the first story. So I was happy when Bloomberg wrote a lengthy article that I haven't read yet. I'm reading it cold here to you. How Joe Rogan became comedy's new kingmaker. Okay, let's see what Bloomberg has to say. One day in March, during the taping of his podcast, Joe Rogan looked over at his guest, comedian Kevin James, and delivered a well-polished sales pitch. It was time that Kevin James consider a permanent change of scenery. Rogan said, "Come to Texas. Come on, buddy. I got you." The article then tells us how Austin is now being pitched as the new center of the comedy universe. Rogan had a podcast studio, a sauna, a bow hunting range, and most importantly, a new club, the Comedy Mothership. Rogan says the club is always available. You'll have fun. We can work out together. We've got a beautiful gym. Rogan is a fan of Texas, saying they're not interested in controlling what you buy and where you go and what you do on your land. You can own a zebra. Kevin James declined. I wonder where Kevin lives these days. He definitely doesn't live in Queens. Even I don't live in Queens anymore. Queens is nice, but, sometimes you got to move to the suburbs, get a pool. Over the past 2 years, a glowing cadre of comedians and podcasters have heeded Rogan's siren song. They include Shane Gillis, Brian Simpson, Duncan Trussell, Matt McCusker, and Tony Hinchcliffe. Within the industry, Joe Rogan is widely believed to be the most popular podcaster on earth. Now Rogan is cranking up his Austin comedy podcasting machine to magnify the talent, wealth, and influence of his recruits and allies. The rewards of securing a close spot in the Roganverse are significant, his blessing guaranteeing a nice boost in audience share and in advertisers looking to sell their products to consumers. Bloomberg tells us it's a good time to be investing in comedy infrastructure. Maybe advertise on a daily comedy podcast. That's all I'm saying. Stand-up comedy gross ticket sales between 2012 and 2023 nearly tripled, going from $371 million to $909 million, according to Pollstar. Steve Adler, the former mayor of Austin, Texas, says, "Our tolerance for taking risks is higher than any other city that I've been to in the world." The article then tells us what Rogan tends to talk about on his show and his bio. Fear Factor, UFC, you probably know that if you're listening to me. Brian Garr, a Cap City regular, says, "Before Rogan, Austin was a good place for smart comedy, known for comedians who didn't do a lot of easy jokes. Most stuck around and enjoyed the low-key community. It's always been a little bit of a sibling to the music scene." Rogan decided to build a club of his own. At first, he considered buying a ranch, constructing an amphitheater, and throwing outdoor comedy shows featuring barbecue and a gun range. He scrapped that idea and overhauled the Ritz, a historic theater on 6th Street. Since opening in 1929, the Ritz had evolved several times. It was the city's first integrated movie theater, a center of Austin's country music scene, a rock venue, a punk hotspot, and a porn hall. Most recently, it had been a 2-screen movie theater. Is that different than a porn hall? Was the porn hall not showing movies? I mean, we can argue about the quality of the movie. Is a porn hall not a movie theater? What's a porn hall if it's not a movie theater? Rogan spared no expense. He wanted a comedy club designed by a comedian for comedians with state-of-the-art lighting, sound system, and camera. A place where Netflix producers would be thrilled to film and from which new and influential comic voices would emerge. He had the ceiling lowered in the main performance room to make it feel more intimate. That was a suggestion from Louis C.K., which Bloomberg calls the semi-canceled comic Louis C.K. At the door, customers must hand over their mobile phones, which are sealed in pouches and made inaccessible. Rogan has said on his podcast this helps improve the audience's focus. Of course, it allows him to control what the public sees from inside the mothership. Social media can cut both ways. This article is long and I'm skimming it. The mothership takes no chances. During a recent visit, a security guard not only inspected a Business Week reporter's purse, but also her sunglasses, explaining that sunglasses can be outfitted with recording equipment. Joe, man, if you're worried about me wearing like Google glasses to bootleg a Tuesday night show, stop. Just stop. The only images from inside the club that make it to social media are the ones sanctioned by the mothership's producers. This article just went sideways on you, Joe. This started off as a wax job, and now we're getting into the, Joe Rogan exposed part of this. The tight control also allows Rogan and his colleagues to work on new material without having to worry that it'll get out into the world prematurely or in the wrong hands. Comedians at the mothership get paid from $100 to $500, significantly more than what they'd make at other Austin clubs, according to one comic. But that's not why most comics are there. The money is made by hosting ad-supported podcasts, touring arenas, and selling stand-up specials. Top acts selling such specials can get anywhere from $5 million to, at the very high end, $20 million, according to comedy agents. Rogan typically performs 3 days a week at the Mothership, making jokes about such things as Neanderthal genes, the pregnant man emoji, donkey sperm, and Jeffrey Epstein. Rogan says, "I think we need another club. It's mobbed every night." We then get into Kill Tony, a wonderful podcast that's every Monday night at the Mothership. Hinchcliffe sits at a table flanked by fellow comedian Brian Redband, the original producer of Rogan's podcast. They're joined by a rotating guest entertainer or two, such as David Spade or Post Malone or Theo Von. They then explain how Kill Tony works. Since the show's relocation of the Mothership, new episodes of Kill Tony typically get more than 2 million downloads. It's currently ranked number 9 on Spotify. On YouTube, the show has more than 1 million subscribers. In August, Kill Tony will do 2 nights at Madison Square Garden in New York. I didn't know that. Wow. Which is not to say the club is for everybody. There are plenty of established comedians who will probably never perform at the Mothership, whether because they belong to other less aggressive schools of comedy or because an association with Rogan would feel too off-brand. At some level, it's a club for joke tellers who are already in Rogan's circle or who will do whatever it takes to work their way in. Wow, there's a lot more left to this article. So this is what I was talking about with Mike on the Letterman podcast. He said, do you plan to do these special episodes? This is a perfect example of, I thought this was just going to be story number 1. As I mentioned at the beginning, I didn't pre-read it. Could I pre-read these things? I could, but I like to react to them as we go. If I pre-read it, then not that I'm faking it, but I don't react the same way as whereas I go, oh, wow, I like to hear these things first try. But boy, there's a lot to this article left. And as I mentioned, there's no oxygen in this room, so I'm going to take a break, literally go upstairs and have a drink of water and breathe, and I'll come back and we'll do more of this. It is not a slow news day. I can tell you now, I'm going to bump 5, 6, 7 stories into tomorrow and Monday, which is great from a creator standpoint. I like having extra stuff, but yeah, this is Bloomberg's look at Joe Rogan. We'll be back in a second. This article we're looking at is from Bloomberg. It is titled, "How Joe Rogan Became Comedy's New Kingmaker." Bloomberg tells us when local comedians first heard Joe Rogan was coming to town, some grumbled. One local comedian, Ariel Isaac Norman, was not a grumbler, but says the downside to the Rogan invasion is a boom in open mic nights around town that are borderline unwatchable thanks to a certain strain of amateur who thinks aggressively attacking wokeness, no matter how ham-handedly, amounts to comedy gold. She says it can be really awful to listen to men making disgusting rape apology jokes, that kind of stuff, saying bigoted things, talking disgustingly about women. I'm not one of those people who's easily offended, but it needs to be funny. Inside the Mothership, on the top floor, is the green room and inner sanctum, where the regulars of Rogan's clan can catch up with visiting comics, trade gossip, chomp on cigars, shoot tequila, crush tacos, or watch whoever's performing from a balcony overlooking the main stage. A private tunnel system allows comedians to arrive at the back entrance and travel up to the green room. When somebody like Chappelle stops by, the crew can get him into the club and on stage without spoiling the surprise. That's a good thing. On the main floor is the bar, Mitzi's, named after Comedy Store owner Mitzi Shore, mother of Pauly Shore. The club will hold auditions from time to time. The most promising comedians get jobs as door guys. They get paid hourly to help around the club several nights a week, and frequent opportunities to perform at cast shows. Up-and-comers get to work on their show, grow their stature, and if they're funny enough, earn a rare slot alongside Joe Rogan himself. Tucker Carlson dropped by the club and said, "I remember what a big deal it was to fly out to Burbank and do Jay Leno. Who'd bother doing that for a linear TV show now? We're in a Rogan moment." Wow, what an article. Langston Kerman has announced his next comedy special, Bad Poetry, on Netflix August 20th. Langston Kerman talks parenting a top-tier baby, teaching mean teens, and managing his mother-in-law's dating apps, directed by John Mulaney. The new hour was taped at the Green Mill in Chicago. Mulaney said, "Langston is a champion. The set is ridiculously funny." The Guardian profiled some shows you might want to see at the Edinburgh Fringe. These are 6 of the funniest comedians. Number 1, Joe Kent Walters, who grew up on a diet of the Mighty Boosh and Vic and Bob, started out running an alternative comedy night in the basement of his Leeds student house. His show immerses us in Frankie's mad place as he stalks the stage, playing with the audience and singing catchy tunes. Number 2, Andrew Doherty, the man behind this year's most striking show title, Gay Witch Sex Cult. Love it. He's making his solo debut with this queer folk horror comedy. Doherty hopes you leave thinking, I haven't seen anything like that before. Number 3, Kate Chica. Her style is chatty, sarcastic, like you would tell stories to your mates, a bit gossipy. Expect top-tier sexual anecdotes, dissections of race and gender, and insights from her travels. Basically, sex and colonialism. Number 4, Marjolaine Robertson. I'm putting the numbers here. They didn't rank them. I'm just trying to keep track of if I've gotten them all. Folktales have always influenced her work. She spent lockdown nights telling stories on Twitch and weaves them throughout her stand-up. She's a compelling narrator. Every show has a folktale to illuminate the story, but there are moments where it's brutally real. I want to make people laugh, but also potentially help people. Number 5, Sarah Roberts, who 5 years ago was a scriptwriter and arts journalist. After her first success at stand-up, she says, "I was so delusional, I quit my job the next day." She's crafted a compelling persona, a deadpan delivery, and knowing girlishness that give her punchlines a sharp but charming edge. She admires Catherine Cohen and Kate Berlant, and says there's an element of, I think it's amazing, but nothing's going right. And number 6, Jin Hao Lee. Jin Hao Lee was inspired by Eddie Murphy's Delirious. He honed his craft in the clubs of Singapore and Scotland. His stand-up is sweet, calm, and reflective, just like Eddie Murphy, with tales spanning army conscription in Singapore, Scottish seagulls, recurring nightmares, and childhood dreams. Jin Hao Lee says it's like a violent children's storybook. There are moments when animals come alive, but moments when it's grotesque and scary. Oh, and today, up at the Zombie Just for Laughs Montreal Comedy Festival, Dane Cook. I continue to speculate that that was booked when they were going to have a traditional festival, I'll call it. But here at the zombie version of it, Dane Cook tonight at Just for Laughs Montreal. I missed going this year. Hopefully they could do a traditional festival next year with the way it was. I understand what happened this year, and I don't want to put down their efforts this year. But, you know, it's not the same as, say, the 40th anniversary Just for Laughs, where they showed off. Trying not to be vulgar. You know what I was going to say. Showed off. You know what I meant. Trying not to use that phrase. It's kind of crass, isn't it? Yes. And that's your comedy news for today. See you tomorrow.